All right, it says we're live. There was supposed to be a 10-second lag. Oh, we are live. Josh and Halley, Halley, it's our time to shine here.
Fantastic.
I'm sure people are just going to start to trickle in. But I think the best thing here is for us all to introduce ourselves to give some people time to trickle in. So I'm Chris. I manage the agency partnership channel here at Clearbanc. My core role at the company is really twofold. It's to help provide financing for e-commerce companies that are looking to scale through our agency partners, and it's also another piece of my role is to make sure that I'm finding the right agency, which is often EmberTribe for our Clearbanc portfolio clients, and to help them grow. And so we've done both those pretty extensively. I'll pass it over, I guess, first to Halley over at EmberTribe to introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Halley from EmberTribe, and I'm the director of marketing. But before that, I was a growth specialist for EmberTribe, helping us scale up our awesome e-commerce clients to 10 times their growth using, if they had the cash runway that Clearbanc can give you, or if they had it themselves. So it's a very exciting time to be here and talking about how your brand can grow. Josh, take it away.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm Josh Sturgeon, co-founder of EmberTribe, and just a little bit about EmberTribe. So we're focused primarily on D2C e-commerce companies. And then I'd say about the 30% rest of our book of business is early stage SaaS companies. So it's a good blend for us. And really just, we love the story. We love the upswing of early stage founders who just want to find what we call channel fit. So we use a lot of paid acquisition, so paid digital advertising, Facebook, Google, et cetera, which we'll get into some more, and help them find that predictable machine for growth for their business.
Perfect. Thanks for introducing yourselves. I guess, I'll launch it off. We've met each other about 2 years ago. I've been at Clearbanc for about 2 years. And the first thing that you guys told me was, listen, we take companies that are doing roughly $20,000 a month, and we take them to $200,000 a month. And that's like our specialties through various growth systems on traditional, like a multi-channel approach. Can you just walk us through a little bit about what your strategy is to take that revenue from the $20K a month up to the $200,000 a month?
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Do you want to go, Josh, or shall I?
Go for it, Halley.
All right. This is good for you. It's basically something that I did recently for quite a few of our clients. And the key for us is to create a growth system that isn't just like one paid traffic channel. So what we see a lot is that we have people coming across and being like, hey, I've gotten a lot of success getting to this 20K per month point, which is pretty amazing if you think about it, because they're doing everything by themselves. They're working really hard. They're hustling. And then what happens is that we take their business, which is at that crucial point of growth, and we start to launch them onto one paid traffic channel. And then as we expand and test and iterate and get some really great growth results, we usually divide it into 3 phases of traction, profit, scale. So traction is like, will this actually be a viable offer? Can we get them to the point where like we can get consistent sales? And then profit is, can we make them profitable sales consistently? And then scaling is, let's just keep going, just grow and grow and grow, and like just keep expanding it till we get them to 10 times where they were before. And so we usually end up going about a very strategic way, because it's just not enough to have paid ads running. You need to make sure that you're strategically growing a system that kind of maximizes your profit as a small business so that you can get to that 20K mark and be cash positive instead of always trying to catch up with your cash flow and your spending. But Josh also has some really good points around that, which are super cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to, I guess, just underscore something Halley said about testing and experimentation, because that really is at the crux of what we do for our clients. And it stands in pretty stark contrast to, say, like what the traditional agency model looks like. And the traditional model is, all right, we're going to brainstorm a campaign idea, and then we're going to just double down on that no matter what. And we're going to ride that to the end, no matter what the results are. And you used to be able to get away with that if you were, a Don Draper style agency, because there's no measurement in place. But living in this world of having really precise measurement of how your campaigns are performing, it demands this kind of experimentation and iteration. And so I think what's really popular in our industry is to admire the growth hack, like admire the silver bullet that took this brand from zero to whatever. But what people miss out on is that it's really the incremental compounding growth over time that brings you into the stratosphere. It's like that principle that 1% improvement every day results in like a 37x increase over the course of a year. It's just getting those base hits after base hits. And every once in a while, you hit one out of the park. But it's that predictable compounding growth that really helps people go from that kind of early stage revenue to, like I said, to the stratosphere.
Right. And so 1% growth, that's Atomic Habits. I think that's the book.
Yeah, I mean, it even predates James Clear, right? It goes back to manufacturing and lean manufacturing, and it's a principle that's just kind of like what Einstein is attributed the quote of compounding growth. It's like another wonder of the world. It's something that's been around for a long time, but it's being applied to our context here now. And
would you say there's a playbook that you could deliver to one client to say, like, this is how you do it? Or does it differ per vertical, per brand, whatever, per stage of the company? Or is it generally like, hey, it's these 3 stages and it'll always be some variation of these 3 stages?
Yeah, so I like to think about this in 2 ways. One is just content and audience. So like that's very vertical specific. If we have something in the fitness space or the finance space or whatever it might be, there is a nice documented set of experiments or campaigns that we've run in that vertical. And so we can kind of fast forward to success and understand like, okay, like this is what we know the audience typically responds to. Here are the hooks, here are the angles to use. But then there's the kind of evergreen, like, what's your process? Like, what's your process for getting learnings and for testing and prioritizing kind of what to ship in a campaign? And so both of those work hand in hand. It's like you want to be able to have the vertical expertise, but what's even more important is just having that system, that kind of system and process that you can deploy in any business, in any industry.
Right. I think something that really intrigues me about your agency is your balance between direct-to-consumer e-commerce and then your B2B SaaS. So selfishly, I guess a question for me is like, how does your channel strategy differ between direct-to-consumer and the B2B? Does it start with the same playbook, or is it a completely different beast you're trying to tackle?
Yeah, there's definitely a difference, but there's similarities as well. So Halley, feel free to chime in here because I know you've done a lot in both of these as well. But I'll just start off by saying, it's funny because people in the early days, we actually carved out a little niche for ourselves in doing B2B advertising on Facebook. And people are like, what are you, crazy? Like, my audience isn't on Facebook. And then you look at the numbers and you look at the sheer amount of people, 2 billion plus counting, that entire family, that entire ecosystem of apps. Your audience statistically is on that platform. Whether you think they're spending a lot of time on it is up for debate, but we've had, clients in the B2B space where they were trying to battle it out on paid search or traditional channels to reach their audience. And then they saw like an 80% reduction in their cost of acquisition by just trying something fresh, even if it felt weird, and it felt like it wasn't a fit. And the fact is, through audience modeling, through third-party data providers, there's a lot of ways to get in front of a B2B audience in these more consumer based channels. So a lot of the strategies and tactics still apply there. It just, you need to kind of reimagine how to reach your audience, even if you're just not targeting a job title per se.
Also, a big thing that we find when we're testing is to challenge assumptions. So like the assumption that because other people in your industry are doing this is what you should be doing. That's something that we find a lot of owners or founders will come in with and be like, well, but this is how I think we should market my product. And it's like, well, until we test that and prove it to be true, we can't really know, right? Because we all want to know what the best way to market your product is, and be that SaaS or be that a clothing company, whatever it is. So that's something that we find a lot of people struggle with when it comes to really wanting to expand their business. And then, we need to test to make sure that those assumptions are all on par. And so what we find is that we actually can break open a lot of growth by looking at that stuff and testing it and seeing if it works or not, just like Josh was saying. The other thing as well is that most people don't take into account their funnel length, like how long it takes from somebody to see your business to actually sign up to be like a free lead if it's a SaaS company, and then to becoming a paid user. So like when you look at your funnel length, it's not going to be, D2C is very short and fast, 7 days probably max. But when it comes to SaaS, you're going to have a longer funnel. And so you need to compensate for that accordingly. And you need to be looking at the right metrics and KPIs of your paid spend and making sure that it is on track, because it takes longer. So you need to make sure that your numbers are working out the way that you would hope they would.
Right. You get the first consumer to be in the freemium model, if you will, and then 30 days later, 45 days later, whatever it may be, that's when they start turning into a paid customer. So you have to adjust your funnel in terms of when your expectation of when you can be a net positive on a B2B SaaS client versus a direct consumer e-commerce, right?
Right. And so like those expectations, people sometimes forget the context of it. And so that's something that's really important too, is like setting expectations that are realistic for us, because we would love to get people amazing results, but like sometimes it takes more time based on your industry or niche.
Yeah. And that's, go ahead, Josh.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to tack on and say also, like if you have a sales organization and the purpose of deploying paid media is to generate leads, you absolutely have to make sure that other part of your funnel, like the call one, if there's an SDR involved, like you have to make sure that all of that is really well documented. Otherwise, you just come into this mess and it's like a soup of variables and you cannot isolate what's going wrong and what's going right. And a lot of, marketing people have got a bad reputation for just delivering the lead and then just saying, hey, good luck, right? Like we're doing our job, we're delivering. No, you cannot function like that in 2021. Like you have to make sure that there's unity and consistency across every touch point. So that's a common mistake that we'll see is people just want to dive right into leads and they don't have that sales process kind of implemented and measurable on the back end.
Which is why we're focusing more on growth systems instead of just paid traffic, because we take, we believe in the holistic system to get you where you want to be, not just like driving leads, like Josh said.
Exactly. Yeah. On the finance side as well, it's direct to consumer. The needs of that of that merchant is much different than a B2B SaaS merchant in terms of payback periods and things like that. And so that was a learning curve for us when we had first started about 5 years ago. We had the MCA for merchant cash advance for our direct consumer. We noticed with the SaaS that we're going to have to basically recreate a brand new product for that segment, just given the length of the funnel and everything we've chatted about here. Cool. It looks like we have a question here. What are some of the metrics that you use to help you understand ROAS? From Carl Brooks.
Ooh, do you want to go, Josh? I know you.
Sure. Yeah. So I think Carl is talking here probably about return on ad spend, ROAS. And, that in and of itself is a metric, right? And it's a metric that a lot of people will hang their hat on and say, like, it's really important for us to get at least fill in the blank, 2x return on ad spend. All that really means, right, is like for every dollar that you're spending in marketing, how much are you getting back in terms of revenue? And I think one thing that we try to instruct our clients and educate them on early on is that there's a lot of other metrics that are important leading up to that. And if you're hyper focused on just return on ad spend, you could be missing that your add to cart ratio to an initiate checkout is completely broken, right? Like, and nobody is able to actually go through the checkout process on a mobile device or whatever it might be. And so the first thing we want to do is try to take stock of kind of all the key performance indicators in that e-commerce funnel leading up to ROAS and then even beyond ROAS, so that you can spot where there's a block or where there's an inconsistency or where there's kind of room to optimize.
So like for specific numbers, Carl, if you're a D2C e-commerce brand, I would say like we're looking at a 2% click-through rate from your ad to your website. From there, I would say we were looking at like about a 50% add to cart ratio, then a 50% to initiate checkout, and then a 25% to purchase. That's off the top of my head. So I can definitely make sure that double check those because they always are improving for us. But when it comes to that, like look at your business's benchmarks currently without paid traffic, which is probably like warm traffic you're sending, right? Organic traffic through social media, through word of mouth. So that's going to be warmer and it's going to be doing really well. And then use that as like a benchmark when you start to put cold traffic in to see like how it compares and like where it differs in performance. Because if you're finding that, like Josh said, you're paying all this money on ads and people are not adding to cart, that could be a myriad of different issues. It could be your audience. It could be your website being too slow to load. And so really at the end of the day, this is where the testing becomes so crucial. Your return on ad spend when you are trying to get traction in those like first 3 to 6 months could be just like a break even. Like you're just trying to break even on your costs so that you can figure out all these different questions to help you move forward into the profit phase of being like, how do I get profitable sales moving forward? And then how do I scale that? So what I would say first is that, like Josh said, figure out your benchmarks and then compare it with cold traffic and then start to test and iterate on that.
And that stage 2 of profitability is really where everybody has a different ROAS where they hit their profitability, right? Just because you're a 2 to 1 or a 3 to 1 ROAS does not mean that you're profitable in any way, shape, or form. And so that's where the two of us, the two companies, basically are aligned is really in that second phase when there starts to be profit on the ROAS, say it's 3-1, 4-1, whatever it may be. We can really quickly see if Clearbanc's a fit for that brand. So what we do is we look at, okay, you're going to spend $10,000 a month on ads and you have a 4-1 ROAS. Well, listen, you're going to take back basically $40,000 from the $10,000, and then you're going to minus the cost of goods sold plus the 6% to our capital. And really that's where you see the net of the possibility of, if I do double my ad spend, I'm not going to maintain that 4-1 ROAS. So that's really where our two companies start to mesh. It looks like we have another question here. As a founder, do you address, this is a really great question, Nicole. So this is, as a founder, do you address all the media streams from Pinterest to TikTok to LinkedIn, so all the various channels? Like, it seems like there's a new channel every day. How do you address these as they come up and determine which ones are successful? I think the question.
Yeah, I'll start with this one. So we like we like to eat our own dog food, as the saying goes, which is, one of our primary channels of our own client acquisition is through our own ad campaigns. And so we're always testing on ourselves first, wherever possible, right? And we have a number of other projects besides the agency that we can use to kind of test new channels or new tactics on. So as an agency, we just dive headfirst in, like, we're trying to get early access to everything that there possibly is to advertise on, just because we're curious and we want to try to put it into our own stack on ourselves first. But I think there's this shiny object syndrome too, where it's like, if you want to jump to the new thing too quickly, you're robbing ad spend from somewhere, right? So you have to be really mindful about, what can I afford to earmark for testing apart from the spend that I already have allocated to try to hit my business goals. And so what we see happen sometimes is people, they want to like have that first mover advantage, and they dive headfirst into a new platform, and they've taken a quarter of their spend for that month and thrown it into TikTok or whatever it might be, and it falls flat. Now they're behind the 8 ball. It's tough to come back from that. So you just have to have a good sense of what you can earmark. Absolutely. If you want to be an early adopter, jump right in. It becomes a strategic advantage when you get there before your competitors, but don't do it at, I guess, the behest of the rest of your spend and getting behind on your goals.
Usually what I found when I was growing the e-commerce brands for founders is that what happens is that for a lot of these new social media platforms, you're actually better off being an organic user instead of a paid user, because a lot of the back end like paid media platforms aren't really there yet in terms of like sophistication and being able to use it and get the results you want. So, if it's a brand new platform, usually going on there and being just like a user, promoting your products, engaging with people is the best way forward. Like Josh was saying, like, you basically want to make sure that you've gone through traction, figuring out all the questions about your brands on one channel. I would probably recommend, if you're e-commerce, to start with Facebook. Once you get into the profit, where you've answered key questions and you're consistently making profitable sales, and you can actually afford to take, it could be in the scale phase, you can actually afford to take some of that profit and put it into a new platform consistently, giving it again, because you're basically starting from scratch again on a new platform, but with better findings and better information. So that's pretty amazing. And you can basically keep expanding out on different channels, but you do want to make sure, like Josh was saying, that you do it strategically so that your growth system can kind of capture those leads together, so that as you expand, you're going to be able to sustainably do this instead of like constantly just dipping your toe in and having to take it back out again. And that's not really what you want. So I've gone with different brands, and we've gone from like Facebook, usually in the past 6 months. What I've seen is Facebook, Snapchat, Pinterest, and then you can keep going onwards. But that's usually for e-commerce. So something to think about, but definitely keep your eye on the goal, which is to make one channel profitable first. And then, like Josh was saying, once you have the money to go and expand outward, you can do that.
Right.
Yeah, I was just going to add on and say, listen, just think about the context of some of these platforms too. And that's why it's great to be an organic user first, to understand what's going on here. How are people engaging on this platform? What's the context of where I am? I heard somebody say one time that, Facebook is the past, Twitter's the present, Pinterest is the future, meaning people are posting about what happened on Facebook or Instagram. People are live tweeting in the present about on Twitter, and then Pinterest, they're planning a nursery or their wedding or whatever it might be. So really become mindful of what the context is, even if it's just I'm blowing off steam and I'm procrastinating. That's just good to know. And that might be true for all social media. I don't know, but context is important.
I think it also matters for what stage of your business are you in. If you're in awareness, people tend to go towards Facebook for an awareness play. If you're already more mature brand, there's going to be some more spend allocated to Google, which are the two main channels. Leads me to my next question, which is a bit of a follow-up to that, is like, what do you think the top channels are for 2021? Do you guys think I've heard of Google starting to come back, a little bit more spend on the Google platforms? We see that with the Clearbanc spend. My question is, like, what channels are starting to explode up in 2021?
Yeah, I think if you have an existing product category, meaning like you haven't created something that's just so unique and people don't even have the language yet to search for it, then shopping and paid search is always a great place to start. It's expensive, but when you're trying to get your first customers, it can be worth driving some of that more qualified traffic to your site through paid search that has a really high intent, like they're searching exactly for what you do, because that will feed your pixel data across the other paid social channels. So even if you're paying a premium for those early customers, you're actually kind of investing and training the pixels across these other platforms, which will then help you model and find these other people on these other channels that aren't necessarily searching, but meet the profile of the person who was searching before. Halley, I know that you've been doing some kind of early research and exploration in some of the other things, like some of the other secondary channels that that were put into use. But I would just say, like, in general, there's a lot of shifts that are happening in the world of tracking. Don't let that, I guess, derail you from the basics, which are, hey, Facebook and Instagram and Google, which encompasses a lot of different products. Those two are still staples kind of in your arsenal. Use those as a launching point and then very judiciously kind of add on from there.
Yeah. So taking that, I would say the next thing that I would start to look at if I was growing an e-commerce brand using paid traffic is Snapchat, because the back end is a similar sort of setup as to Facebook. So it's easy to use for the everyday user. And it also is got a sophisticated enough setup that you can get great results for an e-commerce brand on there without necessarily having to pay a major bank. So we've been on a majority of platforms, and Snapchat definitely was the one that I was most excited about for our brands that got to a place that could expand, because that one had a really good set of solid results that we consistently had.
Does Snapchat still skew to a younger demographic?
No, I mean, they actually have to tell people a lot when they're onboarding, being like, we get people all the way up to 55. But yeah, it generally has a younger demographic. So younger demographic with money. So I don't know if that appeals to anybody on this chat, but it definitely works.
Right.
If done right. Caveat.
I'd say also, don't neglect the fact. So Google, like, obviously owning YouTube and being able to serve ads on that platform, pre-roll ads, really starting to see some great early traction there. And again, when we're thinking about like a multi-channel strategy, being able to get the type of reach that you can get through like a YouTube pre-roll ad and that TrueView platform of only paying for the actual engaged viewers that are on there, it's an incredible advantage. And again, when you're early stage, you're trying to just generate some quick wins and quick results, definitely make sure that's a part of your strategy.
Spend on YouTube skyrocketed. I think they split that out to start reporting on YouTube ad revenue specifically in the last maybe year and a half or 2 years, and I think it doubled in the last calendar year. So I think a lot of people are taking advantage of that pre-roll as well.
Totally.
I think one thing I wanted to ask you, because I know your agency does it about the best as any agency that I work with, is leveraging our benchmarking tool that we have at Clearbanc that's in a pilot with you guys. How do you leverage the benchmarking tool to help your current clients and maybe even prospects that are coming in?
So I don't want to speak over you, Halley.
That's okay.
I should
trying to figure out.
Halley, go ahead.
It's cool, whatever. So we find that really helpful because it does allow you to compare to an industry that you're in the niche. So it helps with our incoming clients to basically help us to establish like where they're at currently. That plus Shopify, we find gives you really great metrics to basically see like, all right, great. Now we know how you're performing on your store level, and now we know how you're performing on your industry level with Clearbanc Insights. And so that gives us a better understanding of where you're at in terms of like what you can afford to spend, where you need to improve in terms of your performance. Because at the end of the day, those benchmarks are really important for helping you to see like where you can improve quickly. Like if you don't know how you're supposed to be doing or how you're supposed to be succeeding, those numbers really do help us like pinpoint problem areas really quickly instead of having to, guess or test it out to find out those problem areas. So Josh has more more info though.
No, that's it. That's all. That's really good. I think really simply about this stuff. It's like, listen, you've got to be able to understand, first you got to be able to measure your own metrics, right? Your own kind of marketing metrics. And that's super important just to know where you stand. You can't optimize anything until you know where you stand in that funnel. But then it's also really helpful, to Howie's point, is to have this benchmarking data to understand how are my peers in this vertical performing in these different ways, because that might actually reveal to you where you have the most opportunity, and therefore where you should kind of focus on optimizing first. If your cost of acquisition is way too high, then you should start looking at, ways to introduce maybe more cost-effective channels or to optimize that e-commerce funnel. So it gives you a really great diagnostic as a starting point to say, listen, in a world of limited resources and time, here's where I'm going to start, focusing either my marketing dollars or my time and energy brainstorming experiments.
I think it allows you to take a step back and look like, okay, so my click-through rate is high versus my competition. And you start to put the pieces together and say like, oh, maybe my click-through rate's high, but I'm not performing as I do on my ROAS. So maybe I need to increase my average order value or bundle some products together or something like that to be able to impact that ROAS in a different way. So this gives you a bit of I hate the saying with 30,000 foot view to step up and take a look and say like, hey, how am I doing versus other people and where are the opportunities for growth? So it looks like we have about 3.5 minutes left here as a half an hour chat. I get a little bit more macro with this, and a question that I wanted to make sure I touched on was like, what are some key indicators that you see in a long-term successful founder? Like, what do you look for in the founder specifically where you're like, we have some room for some long-term growth with this specific founder?
Yes, we have a real advantage here. Like over our time speaking with founders, like we've had literally over 4,000 conversations, and each of those is pretty well documented. And so we've actually done some work in the last year to go back and kind of back test, be like, who are the people who came through our sales process and had the most success? And what was most interesting about maybe their answers to some of our questions in this intake form, in this intake process? And bar none, like one of the things that comes to the surface over and over and over again is, listen, do you know your numbers or not? Like, are you aware of things that you mentioned, Chris, like gross profit margin? Are you aware of how to get, advantages at scale, like negotiating with your suppliers? Like whether you're a math person or not, doesn't matter. If your business is important to you, you've got to understand some of the key metrics behind the health of your business. And so we've seen that for founders is like, if they can answer very quickly what those key answers are to gross profit margin, to repeat purchase rate, to things like that, that's usually a type of client who's going to have a lot of success because they can look forward strategically and say, okay, here's what we need to do to get to where we want to go. Beyond that, I would just say like they've got to have a long-term vision. The folks who want to come in and build a lifestyle business and start minting money from day one, listen, more power to you. But this is a very dynamic and changing game. And so if you're not ready to build a business that's going to stand the test of time, that's going to get repeat customers, if you're happy just building a drop shipping business that could be, the fidget spinner is here today and gone tomorrow, that's a fun game to play too, but it's not going to be a very sustainable business. So having a longer term vision, thinking about product lines, thinking about how to increase the lifetime value of a customer through back-end marketing, like that kind of mindset of a longer term view correlates very highly to somebody who's going to be successful.
And just jumping in there, for someone who views their business as something that is like a long-term product that they're looking to sell, it usually has more of a mindset around numbers that allows for more testing. Whereas if it's a business where someone is really passionate about it, we love people who are like that, but we find that there's a little bit more reluctance or friction around testing new things, trying new things, because they have such a solid idea of what they want to do in their mind. So that is the key. Flexibility when it comes to your brand growing and expanding. It's gonna outgrow you to a certain extent, and you're going to have to be comfortable with that. It's like raising a kid. Like, they're not going to become a doctor, but they're going to become successful in their own right. Like, that's amazing. So, yeah.
Some people are willing to buy the data and learn from that data, which is what you do when you're more in that launching phase. And other people are not. They're like, I want to start seeing a positive ROAS immediately, right? So I think it goes hand in hand with the type of founder that you are. Is it a long-term view or a shorter-term view? So listen, I think I'd love to turn it over to the EmberTribe team, Josh or Halley, whoever wants to. Halley, sorry, I know we just went through the pronunciation. And give you the floor for a minute here to just tell everybody what you can deliver for them. I think we have 150 people here that are eager to join an agency. So I'll flip it over to you guys just to end it off.
I think Josh should do this one.
Let's do it.
He's got a face ready for this.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm excited. This is a great conversation. We're excited to be, partnering with you guys at Clearbanc. We have the great pleasure of speaking with energetic, optimistic fund founders every week, and it's the highlight of what I get to do is to talk to people, kind of draft off of their energy and their vision and what they want to bring to the world. So I would just say, listen, if you're trying to think about how do I scale this to the next level and do it in a way that's sustainable and healthy, we'd love to talk to you. We'd love to think through this with you. Our process is very consultative. We try to create pro formas and spreadsheets and hand all that over to you free of charge to kind of make your own decisions. But yeah, listen, we enjoy the conversation. We enjoy meeting new people. So I don't know if there's a link here wherever you're watching this, but there should be some resources here to get in touch with us. Otherwise, EmberTribe.com, book a call, and we'd love to talk to you.
Perfect.
Yeah, we're so
and
excited.
everybody that's registered, we can send a follow up if you have any questions. We can make sure that we answer them. I know we didn't get to all of them in the comments. So thanks so much, Josh and Halley, for taking the time today.
Thanks, Chris.